Um, okay, let's start, my friends. My name is Elad Shecher. I'm a CSS HTML architect and code evangelist at AnimaApp. Besides this, I love CSS very much and I'm writing lots of articles on CSS that you can find in this link at medium.com. And I'm community leader at CSS Class on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I love to talk about CSS in every conference and in every meetup and every webinar. And we are here in this online conference, everything because this coronavirus pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic is disrupted our life in so many ways. Even for me, I needed to talk in two big conferences in Europe, one in Novosibirsk in Russia, and the second one in Dev Days in Vilnius in Lithuania, and of course, all the conference all around the world and being canceled. And in this situation in life, you maybe can be sad, but from my perspective of view, we don't have time to be sad in our life because life is very, very short. And in bad situation in life, you need to try to get the bad situation and create a better situation, a good situation. And this is exactly what I've done. The first thing that we have because this coronavirus pandemic, all of us are staying a lot of time home. But I never had the time home before. And this is the best value that we get from this coronavirus pandemic. We have a lot of free time. If I'm working from home, I don't need to go in the morning in the traffic and in the evening in the traffic. And I usually don't have any time at home. And this is my first time that I have time home. The first 2 days that I was staying home because the coronavirus pandemic, I opened my sofa to a bed. That didn't work for 5 years. I put some water and fishes, and everything that I will have a better, a good environment to stay home and enjoy home. And in the first weekend of the coronavirus that we cannot go anywhere, I thought to myself, what I will do now? I have a full weekend that I cannot go out. And I remember that 7 years ago, I created a pure CSS game that called Kill the Birds. And a lot of web developers all around the world like it very much. And I thought to myself that in the last 7 years, I learned so many new tricks in CSS that I can create a lot better one. But what will be the name of the game? What it will be? We are now in the coronavirus. Why not to create a coronavirus game? And this is exactly what I have done. I created a pure CSS game that everything that you see here is only CSS and HTML. Yes, I'm using here some preprocessor like the SAS for the CSS code, and even for the HTML, I'm using here the Pug HTML preprocessor that create a dynamic HTML. That it's meaning that it can being repeat a lot of times some part of the HTML. But there isn't any single line of JavaScript. All the logic is done with pure CSS. It means that when I will click the button, for example, of the UMI button, it will open a pop-up. This logic, pure CSS. When I will close it, again, no JavaScript. And when I will press the Save the World button, the play button of the game, the main navigation will disappear, and instead we will see the game, again, not any single word in JavaScript. And now we have these viruses, and when I will click them, they will disappear, and the counter will go up. Even this logic, everything pure CSS, not any single line with JavaScript. Even the countdown that you see here, pure CSS. How can I do it? Before we start how to do these magics in CSS, when you create in a project, you need to first think about something that inspires you. And the first thing that inspired me, I remember that few months ago, before the coronavirus, I saw this small creature in CodePen that is being painted on Canvas HTML. And I thought to myself that they remind me the coronavirus creature. Maybe I will take some ideas from these creatures. And how will I call the name? Because I didn't play games a lot of time. And I remember very long time ago the Chicken Invader games. And if you know, my game is called the Coronavirus Invaders. Yes, only because this name. And how will I paint the navigation? Because I'm not a web designer. I'm specialized in CSS and HTML, but I'm not a designer. And I took some of the ideas of the main navigation from the Chicken Invaders game. And when you think about inspiration, it's not to create something from nothing. No, it's to think about other ideas and to take them together and create from them something new. And this is exactly what I have done. And the first thing that I wanted to do is to create the small coronavirus creature. And as you can see, this was my inspiration, and in the end, I create something very, very different. And I like it because this is my coronavirus creature. And at the end, I maybe only took the idea of how to create the eyes. And then I started to create the HTML, and I'm thinking a lot of the HTML. I am a CSS architect. I love architecture. Everything is need to be some kind of object oriented that you will understand the code. And when you will look at the code, you know where you are looking at. And this is the structure of the viruses. All the style of all the parts that you see are starting only here in the body. The label that we have with class of coronavirus, it's a label only because the logic of the game that we will talk about later. And this input of type of radio, again, some of the logics. But from here, I started creating the style. But I noticed that in the beginning that I'm doing a lot of repetition in my own code. I'm repeating all those hairstyles 12 hairs, 12 times. And in the game, I have 100 viruses, and you don't want to copy paste the HTML. How you cannot copy paste as HTML? You can use the Pug HTML preprocessor. And yes, this is my first time that I'm using the Pug HTML preprocessor that give me the possibility to don't use JavaScript at all. And of course, in every project in my life, I'm using, of course, the SAS preprocessor, and this isn't different from all my other projects. And this means that now, instead of repeating all this 12 span, I can write them with the while loop that we have with the Pug HTML preprocessor. And yes, you need to get used to it. And when you're working with Pug, you cannot write half HTML and half Pug. Everything needs to be with the Pug code. And as you can see, we can declare variables that go in between 1 to 12 and just print those 12 hairs again and again with dynamic class name that getting the end value and bring it one up every time that the loop is going on and on. And yes, all the HTML need to be converted the way of the written that we have in the Pug HTML preprocessor. And then I wanted to start drawing the coronavirus creature. I wanted first to create the body. I gave it a position relative because all the other parts is according to the body of the virus. I gave it width and height of 100 pixels, background color black and border radius of 50%, and I created a circle. And then I wanted to create the eyes, and I have two HTML eyes. First is the eye 1 and the second one is the eye 2. And I want to create a selector that select them both together. I use the attribute selector with this sign, and this way I'm selecting the both class together, and I gave them position absolute from the top 25%, width and height that is a little bit different, and a background color white and a border radius of 50%, and I created those egg shape. And then I wanted to locate them one from the left and one from the right. The first eye from the left, 25%, and little bit rotated to the inside with the transform and rotate Z of 15 degrees. The second eye, in the same idea, locate from the right, 25%, and rotate Z minus 15 degrees. And then I wanted to create the inner part of the eyes. And again, it's everything the same idea. I'm using here the pseudo element before. And the same idea, width, height, background color, and border radius of 50%, I created these both parts of the eyes. And then I wanted to create the hairs of the coronavirus. And it's very easy when you understand the logic. It's two boxes. Every hair is two boxes, one for the root of the hair and one for the crown of the hair. And why the crown is a little bit circle? Again, border radius of 50%. But now I want to locate it all there all around the coronavirus creature. How I'm doing it? I'm first putting all the hairs in the middle of the coronavirus, all of them, all these 12 hairs. And then I want to locate them according to the body. I'm using for every hair different transform value. For the first one, rotate Z 0 degrees, non-changing, and going from the center, translate Y with minus 65 pixel. But the second hair I want to put here. How can I do it? For the transform, I will give a rotate Z of 30 degrees and only then the translate Y of minus 65 pixels. It means that it now will go in this way. top right, little bit to the right. And it's very important if it's the first time that you hear how transform property is working, because the order of the values matter. If I will write it in the opposite way, first the translate y and then the rotate z, it won't work me correctly. When you're working in transform, the order of the value is very important. And I located all the errors in the same way and put them all around the body of the coronavirus. But wait a minute, I'm repeating my code so many times. What, I cannot do it in a more smart way? Yes, I can. Here I can use the power that we have in the SAS of the SAS preprocessor for CSS. I'm using here the for loop that we can use in the SAS preprocessor. First, I'm creating a variable that calls start position. I give it a 0 degrees. Then I created a for loop that we can create with SAS. I'm creating here a variable of I that going between 1 to 12. This way it's creating me 12 times the class of hair with the number of the I, and I'm just calculating in every loop the start position again and again. It will first be 30 degrees, the second time it will be 60, 90, 120, and I'm just putting the value in the transform on the rotate z value. This loop created this CSS. Very nice way not to repeat ourselves in CSS. But I wanted that this creature will be a lot more alive, and I wanted to create a lot of animation, and I want to create the hair animation. But because every hair has a different rotate z value, it means that I need to create 12 keyframes. Because I don't want to repeat myself when I'm writing the code, I just put the animation in the for loop. This way, it's repeating and creates itself every time that the loop is happening. And the keyframe getting dynamic name. And I wanted that all the error will move in different timelines. We can use for it the animation delay that we have in CSS. But if I'm using positive number of the animation delay, let's say, for example, 60 milliseconds, 120 milliseconds, the animation will first stuck and only then move. But I don't want it. I want that all the parts of there will move in the first millisecond when the page is loaded. How can we do it? We can use, instead of positive values for the animation delay, we can use negative animation delay. The first error will be in minus animation delay of minus 60 milliseconds. The second one, minus 100 milliseconds, and so on and on. And this means that when the first page is loaded, the animation is behaving like it started even before the page is loaded. And this is a really nice trick to create in CSS. But I wanted to give a lot more animation for this coronavirus creature, for the eyes. And I done some animation for the inner eyes, and I wanted to create that the eye would be closed every 5 seconds. How can we do it? I created another pseudo element that called the after pseudo element that have a box with a width of 100% and a background color of black and height of 0 pixel. And every 4.5 seconds, for half a second, you getting height of 100%. This way the eye are getting close. Very nice trick, and all this creature is now seeing a lot more alive. But let's go to the more interesting part. How I created the game. First, before you create a game, you need to know what frame you have in the game. Let's talk about the frame that we have in the game. Let's look at the game, and first you can see this is our main navigation. This is the first frame. The second frame is a pop-up. Yes, we can put frame on frame. This is our second frame, a pop-up that the how to play pop-up. The third frame will be the who am I pop-up. This is our third frame, and the last frame is when we press the save the world button, that is the play of the game button. It will hide the main navigation and show us the game. This is our fourth frame. Yes, we have 4 frames in the game. How I'm reading the HTML? I'm just creating 4 separated container of HTML. The first one is the game menu frame that we saw. The second one is the game itself. The third one is the UMI pop-up, and the fourth one is the autoplay pop-up. But how, when I'm playing the game, I'm first seeing only this frame? Very easy. For all the other frames, I'm just putting display none. This way, I'm seeing only the main navigation frame when I'm loading the game. And then I want to create the logic of how to show the frame when I'm clicking those buttons. How I'm starting to do it? I'm creating an HTML flags. I'm using the input of type checkbox, and everyone have a specific idea. The first input of the toggle game, if it's unchecked, it needs to show us the game menu frame. If it's checked, I want to see the game frame. The second input is the autoplay pop-up. If it's unchecked, I don't want to see the pop-up. If it's checked, I want to see the autoplay pop-up. The same way for the UMI pop-up. If it's unchecked, I don't want to see the pop-up. And if it's checked, I want to see the pop-up. But how I'm triggering those input in the beginning of the HTML that I don't see because they are with opacity of 0. How I'm triggering those inputs. And this is very nice trick. The button that you see in the beginning of the main navigation games are not buttons. They are HTML labels. And in HTML label, you have the possibility to use the for attribute. And the for attribute can be connected to ID. And this way, when I'm clicking the Save the World button, it's triggering this checkbox and getting it to be checked. And if I will click it again, it will be unchecked. The same way for the How to Play button and the UMI button. If I click them, they will trigger this both checkbox. Every click will be checked and the second click will be unchecked. But this still doesn't give us any changing in the visual style, only triggering those input checked to unchecked. How can I use those input to show different style now? And this is the most important trick now. I can use the Sibling Selector and the pseudo element of check that we have in CSS. It means that I can tell a specific input from type of checkbox. If you are checked, go to any sibling elements that you have after it. No matter, you can write it any one that you want and put it display block, display none, everything that you want. And this is the one of the most important trick. And this is exactly what I'm doing. For the button that open and close pop-up, when I'm clicking, for example, the UMI button, it's triggering the input with the name of UMI pop-up. And if it's now checked, I'm going to the sibling element of UMI and just put it a block. The same way for the How to Play button. When I'm clicking it, it will trigger the checkbox that have an idea of how to play pop-up. And if it's checked, go to the sibling element of How to Play and put it with display block. But wait a minute, how I'm closing the pop-up? This button that you see here, the X button and the close button, are not buttons. Again, they are labels that are triggering what any checkbox that you want. It's meaning that this and this are a label that have a for attribute for the How to Play pop-up input. And when I'm clicking them, it's creating the checkbox unchecked and closing the pop-up. Okay, this is a nice trick, but when I'm pressing the Save the World button, I'm doing two operations. First, I'm hiding the main navigation, and then I'm showing the game. How can we do it now? The same trick, but I can now doing as many operations as I want. The input that have the toggle game idea, if it's checked, I'm going to the sibling element of game menu frame and put it display none. And I'm going to the game frame and put a display block. I can do as many operations that I want with this checkbox. And yes, this is written, of course, with Sass. You can do it in two separate lines in CSS if you want to, but it's a lot better way to write it in a Sass preprocessor, a lot more organized way. Let's talk about the next trick, and this is one of the most amazing tricks in the game. When I'm clicking those viruses, they are being disappear, and the score is going up. I'm using here the CSS counters that we have very long time in CSS. Let's talk about those magic of all the score in the game and clicking the viruses that they will disappear. In the beginning of the talk, I told you that all the viruses are wrapped with this label with the class of coronavirus, and they have inside of them input type of radio. And this is one of the part of the trick that when I'm clicking them, I can disappear them. And all the style of the coronavirus are inside of this body of coronavirus. All the style, the body, the hair, the eyes, everything is inside this part of this HTML. And how the logic is work. When you have input inside the label, when you click, no matter which places on the label, it automatically will trigger the input type of radio that you have inside. Because of that, we don't need to put it any ID or any for attribute. And it's meaning that when I'm clicking the viruses, the label element, it will automatically, the input type of radio will do it from uncheck to check. Why I'm using here radio and not a checkbox? Because radio can be checked only one time. And this is very important because I don't want, if you will double click it, it will be one time will be dead and one time will be alive. I want it, if it's dead, it's finished. And how I'm disappearing all the style of the virus, I'm telling that if this input type radio is checked, go to the sibling element of the body and put it with opacity of 0. This way it's disappearing from the screen. And now I want to count all those dead viruses. It means that I want to count all those input type radio that are checked. How I'm doing it? I'm using the CSS counter. I'm declaring a CSS counter before all those inputs. It has to be before all of them. Because of that, I declare it on the body HTML element. How are you declaring a CSS counter? I'm using here the counter reset property and give it a name, Corona. And now I want to count all those input radio that are checked. And just creating this selector, input type radio, if you are checked, I'm using here the property counter increment and increment the same value that I created here. This way I can count all those radio input buttons. And now I want to summarize the score to the screen. And I need to put the summarize after all those input in the game. If you want to put it in the top of the screen, you can use position fix on CSS. But on the HTML, it has to be after all those input. And I'm using here the pseudo element after with the property of content. And I'm using here the counter function that we have in CSS. And just put the value of the corona that we increment here and created here. This way it's listening and print it to the screen all the time. Because it's very complicated example, let's see for it a live example. Here I created 5 coronavirus labels and only with the input type of value that now you can see in the game it's with opacity of 0. All the style of the viruses, the eyes, the hairs are inside the body. Yes, here, but I don't want it to be a lot of code, that it will be a lot more simple. I just remove everything and just stay the body. And I have here the div that can summarize us the score. And let's talk about how first the input is working, the input type of radio. Inside of the coronavirus, I have the selector input type radio. And if it's checked, it's putting the body with opacity of 0. Yes? And the CSS counter is declaring to the body element, counter reset corona. And if the input type radio is checked, the counter increment will go up. And to summarize all the score, I'm using here at the end, this div with class of sum, the pseudo element after with the property of content, using the counter function and putting just the corona value counter. And you believe me that it will working. When I will click this, you see this checkbox that will be checked and the counter is going up. And it doesn't matter which way I click it, the counter is going up. And this is one of the most important tips to create pure CSS game, to use this way of counting and those checkbox in pure CSS game. Very amazing trick in CSS. Let's continue to the next trick. How can I create a CSS countdown without any JavaScript? This is really crazy. And I'm using here again the pseudo element before and after. As you can see, there isn't any number here in the HTML. Empty span. And as you can see, I'm using here the before attribute and the pseudo element and the after pseudo element in CSS on this count element. And the animation is very simple. I'm using here the animation to the content property that going between 9 to 0. But wait a minute, how it's going between 99 to 0? We see here only this number. For every one of the pseudo element before and after, I'm using the same animation. This is the before pseudo element and this is the after pseudo element. But how they work different? In the before pseudo element, I calling the animation of countdown and tell it to get it, that it will be in a duration of 100 seconds, but only one time. And it means that it's going every 10-second numbers down. 9, and after 10 seconds 8, and after 10 seconds 7, and on until it will stuck at 0. The second number is the same animation, but now the animation is taking 10 seconds and will run 10 times. And it means that we'll now go 9, 8, 7, 6, and until 0, and when it will finish, it go again to 9, and 10, 8, 7, 6, it will iterate 10 times. And you want that the animation will stop at the 0 when all the iterations are finished, and it's important to put here the value of forward. This way, when the animation will finish, it will stuck on the 0 value. And it only look like it's a one number that going down, but it's two separated numbers that working separately. Very amazing trick to create in CSS. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, yeah. Okay, random values. Why we need random values? How we can create random values in CSS? First, in CSS, you cannot create any random values. Because of that, let's see how we can create it in SAS and why we need random values. In the game, all these viruses have a different size, a different position in the game here in six positions in the games, and they even rotate in random values. How can I do it? Let's first see it in the real game. I will show you this in editor, and then I will show you a simple example. For creating the animation for all those coronaviruses, I created 100 different keyframes. To not repeat myself, I'm using here the for loop that we have in SAS. And as you can see, I wanted to create that the virus will move in different positions in 6 points of the game. And in the translate Y, for example, I'm using the random function that we have only in SAS, that it's giving us random value that will go between 1 to 80 VH. And in 6 points in the game, and every one of the virus will go to other places because this keyframes is being repeated 100 times with different values. And I given even different scale in 6 points of the game, and even different little bit of rotation. And that you will believe me that there is such thing, randomized values in the SAS preprocessor. Let's see a more simple example for it. First of all, this is the HTML, as you can see. 6 HTML element. There isn't, all these values are written with the content property with the before pseudo element. As you can see, there isn't any really text inside. And I'm using here the for loop, and I'm using here the before pseudo element with the content property, and I'm randomized value between 1 to 80 VH. These are randomized value. That you will believe me that SAS can do us randomized value. Let's change it. I will press enter, and the number here will change. One enter, 1 second, change. Another enter, the number are changing. And this way you can create a lot of possibility that values that are randomized in the game. And this is one of the second one amazing trick that you can create in a pure CSS game. Amazing. And let's talk about how to create the game over curtain. You didn't see it in the game because we needed to wait 100 seconds. How can I know when to put exactly the game over curtain after 100 seconds? And this is one of the simplest trick that we have in the game. The animation take only 0.6 seconds, but we can tell it how many time delay we want that the animation will stuck. And in the real game, I just put it here 100 seconds. But in this example that we don't need to wait so many time, I gave it 5 seconds. It means that if I will refresh the screen, the animation of the game over curtain will take for it 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Amazing trick, and this way you can put the game over curtain as many time that you want. Very nice trick to create the game over curtain. We talk about a lot of trick in this pure CSS game. What is the takeaways from all this talk? You can create a pure CSS games, but this isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that when we are children and we are playing, we enjoy very much to play. And this is one of the best basic thing when we are children to learn new stuff is to play. But when we are adult, we forget that this is the best way to learn stuff. And a lot of web developers try to create homework and to learn some stuff that they don't like. And I think the most important thing to do is to create for yourself any project that you like. And because it interests you, it doesn't matter if it's hard or easy, you will be better at it because it's important for you to succeed. And this is the best way to learn new stuff. And because of that, if you will play a lot and create your own project, you will be a lot better web developer. And this is the most important thing to take from the talk. Play with your own code, create for yourself your own projects. And if you want to know more about these tricks, I have 2 articles on Medium that I will tweet when this talk will finish, how to create the CSS creature and how to create all this trick in the Pure CSS game. I will retweet it in my Twitter account when we finish. And before we finish, of course, you can follow me on Twitter. You can read all my articles in this link on Medium and can see all my other talks in my own website. And if you want to ask me question or on this talk or on CSS, on everything, you can ask me question in the CSS class community on Facebook and LinkedIn. And we finish, my friends. Thank you very much for listening.